我哋夠鐘又夠法定人數開。
We have a quorum. We've passed the appointed hour. So shall we start our meeting? Agenda item number 1, confirmation of minutes. Members, the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th October have been sent to members, and up till now we have not received any proposed amendment. So if there is no objection, shall we confirm the minutes? Okay, thank you. Item 2, information papers issued since the last meeting. Quite a lot of them. I will not read out them one by one. Please just refer to the agenda. Agenda item number 3, items for discussion at the next meeting. Together with the Vice Chairman on the 2nd of November, we had an informal meeting with the Secretary for Environment and discussed our work plan this year. And after discussion, the work plan has been reflected on the list of outstanding items for discussion. Items 16 to 19 are items proposed to be deleted because they have been followed up at various occasions. So any questions on the list of outstanding items for discussion? If not, then let us discuss the items for discussion at the next meeting. The meeting we held on the 21st of December at 8:30 a.m. We propose the administration proposes to discuss 2 items. Number 1, provision of sewerage in Lantau, and number 2, reduction of construction waste. Any comments? No. Okay. I have received a letter from Mr. Kenneth Leung, and the letter has been circulated among members through the Secretariat. Mr. Leung proposes to have a discussion on the EIAO. I have 2 suggestions for members. Number 1, we put this item on the list of outstanding items for discussion, or we will do the following. Mr. Leung's view is very specific. We give his letter to the Secretary for the Environment, and then we wait for the Secretary's reply, and then we follow the matter up. What is your view, Mr. Leung? Chairman, is it possible to do both? The 2 options are not mutually exclusive. Say maybe you can put the item on the list for discussion after 2 to 3 months, or it will be discussed after 2 to 3 months, and at the same time, you send a letter to the Environment Bureau, and then the Bureau should answer ASAP. Maybe say in February or March next year, we will discuss the item. In the interim, we can look at the reply. Well, I'll choose both, Mr. Chairman. Other members, any comments? If not, then, well, so be it. We follow your advice, Mr. Leung. So we send a letter to the Secretary for the Environment, and then the item will be put on our list of outstanding items. All right, let us invite the officials into the room. We are now on agenda item number 4. One of the items for discussion, and that is proposals to tighten emission standards of newly registered motor vehicles to Euro 6 level and motorcycles and tricycles to Euro 4 level. Right, the papers have been sent to members. In the past few days, different groups of the transportation sector have sent their letters to us, or submissions to us. This morning, the Secretary has just tabled a submission by the Professional Crane Lorry Association Limited. So please read this.
喺呢個議程上面呢
On this item, we have Ms. Christine Low discussing the matter with us, and we also have the AD Mr. Mok Wai Chun, Assistant Director, and also Dr. S.T. Mack, Senior Environment Protection Officer. So the Undersecretary, would you please briefly introduce the paper? Please note that this is a legislative proposal. Are you ready, Ms. Low? Please be brief and precise. Chairman, the paper is not complicated. You may have specific questions. I have two experts here, Dr. Mack and Mr. Mok, familiar to you. As you all know, Euro 5 is our standard at present, and we want to raise it to Euro 6. We have a timetable. I believe my colleagues can answer any questions from the panel. We have quite a long agenda today, so please be brief and precise, 4 minutes each, questions and answers together. Those who want to ask questions, Mr. Kenneth Leung. A show of hands, Mr. Kenneth Leung. 2 simple questions. Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Now you propose to raise the level from Euro 5 to Euro 6 in phases. What will you expect? Will the maintenance staff be able to cope with that? Now, we have received a letter this morning from the Professional Crane Lorry Association Limited. In fact, in the recent 1 or 2 months, I beg pardon, 1 or 2 weeks, I received letters from the garages, the vehicular maintenance trade, and they are not. They claim that they are not familiar with the Euro 4, Euro 5 guidelines, and now you want to raise it to Euro 6. Can you provide training to people in the vehicle maintenance trade or vehicle repair trade with regard to big companies which can provide adequate training to their staff members? Are really worried about the small operators. Now, this is a standard for 2018. By 2018, all diesel vehicles will have to be Euro 6, each and every one of them. That's according to the law. But on the whole, the trend should be moving towards clean energy, clean fuel for buses in particular. The emission of buses accounts for the majority of vehicular emission in Hong Kong. Now you are testing single-decker and double-decker electric buses. Now we met with BYD. Though different people had different assessment and views towards BYD. Now you say you will follow Euro 6, and then later they will have Euro 7, Euro 8 as a progression with regard to the implementation of electric bus. Do you have a plan? Now, after COP21 in Paris this year, I don't know what commitments will be made by the leaders, but you should be prepared, shouldn't you? Well, let us answer the question on Euro 6. Everybody is concerned about repair and maintenance of the vehicles. Mr. Mok will speak on this. As for electric bus, I will discuss this in depth later. The AD. I need more time. Chairman, we know that the repair and maintenance trade are concerned about information with regard to repair and maintenance. With regard to the emission reduction arrangement of the Euro 6 fares, and what is the difference? With regard to Euro 6, the emission reduction parts are similar to those of Euro 5. The usage is a bit different, or the efficiency of emission reduction is higher. In fact, the trade has has about 10 years of experience in dealing with the parts, the emission reduction parts. But it doesn't mean that we don't need to do anything. We have been working very closely with the VTC and also the repair and maintenance trade to organize seminars. The trade is briefed on the requirements and knowledge in respect of repair Euro 4, Euro 5, and Euro 6 vehicles. In fact, this evening, together with the VTC and also automakers, we will have a seminar, a technical seminar, and nearly 300 people have enrolled.
We are co-convening the seminar with an organization where they have small, medium garages, large garages. They're self-sufficient. So we're working with small, medium garages, and after each seminar I would ask them how should we improve to help the maintenance industry. So we do take on board their input, and we also work with VTC to strengthen their courses. Under Secretary, well, it's not an easy response. Well, the first issue is we need a legislative timetable. So if you don't mind, I'd like to set aside more time for the electric buses. Mr. Tangalo. Thank you, Chairman. Well, electric buses are very complex. The bus companies say there are a lot of challenges. The quantity is not that large, and road conditions are complex. They're still testing single deck, double deck, and even though they do receive funding from the government. So we're still at a preliminary stage, and we would like more info, and I'm very happy that the Undersecretary is informing us. Well, the Civic Party supports the initiatives. We need to enhance technology on the roads, and we're also concerned about care and maintenance personnel training. So the document is sparse on description of training. Well, could you do a bit more to let our road users and pedestrians rest assured? We don't want technical deficiencies, or let's say we have a citizen purchasing a Euro 6 vehicle and they cannot get maintenance, or if it takes a lot of time and resources for care and maintenance, well, we need to be aware of that. Otherwise, we cannot explain it to the public. We want to improve air quality, but we do need to be aware of the price tags. So we'd like information. I have a specific question for Mr. Mock. Well, you are aware that Volkswagen had a product recall, emission scandal. Well, the Hong Kong government response was that they don't have this problem, but then later on they changed tack and said that they have 200 odd vehicles that were affected, and their first registration had to be revoked. So within government departments, can they review their work and see what needs to be done better, and how can we prevent similar incidents reoccurring? Because there are tricks you can do to pass the emission tests. Well, you don't want to have good intentions and allow people to bypass it through some tricks. So how can you assure the general public and LegCo? P.S. Well, there are two components to the problem. I'll talk about the first part. When the U.S. or EU were aware of the problem, that there were these difficulties with this brand, they discovered it in private vehicles. So the private vehicle models that were affected were not sold in Hong Kong. That's why we said we were not affected. Later on, we discovered that in light goods vehicles, some models had a similar problem. And one model was available in Hong Kong, and the 200-odd vehicles were affected. And because of this, we suspended their emission standard, and we did not allow it to be on sale in Hong Kong. So vehicle manufacturers, if they fool the emission tests in Euro 6, we've always had the query that in a laboratory, when you conduct a test, the environment makes it easy to detect. So they require, starting from Euro 6, the vehicles have to run on the road for testing before they endorse it. So there's an extra step. So if we introduce Euro 6, this will come under our legislation, and I think I'll stop here. That means all Euro 6 testing will have to be done on the road. Basically, yes, but we need a timetable. Euro will start with heavy vehicles first, because the pollution is more severe in those types of vehicles. Then they will introduce light vehicles and private vehicles. They will provide the testing details. So once it's disclosed, we can introduce these road test data. Wu Jiwai. Thank you, Chairman. Tightening vehicle standards, we don't have a lot of objections to that. Well, but I do have to ask that diesel prices are lower than gasoline, but when you tighten the import restrictions, we understand that air pollution, aside from standards, we have an increasing number of vehicles, and as Mr. Wong Gum-sing, the Secretary, in his Q&A in the Council meeting, the government needs to introduce more low-carbon transport arrangements. We need to be more efficient with our roads. So, have you assessed that when we introduce more diesel vehicles in the past, they might find diesel vehicles expensive, but after tightening the standards, more owners might be tempted to switch to diesel vehicles because diesel is cheaper. So have you considered this potential change, that we'll see more cars on the roads unless you tackle the fuel problem, or as Mr. Wong Gum-sing said, the EPD, shouldn't they have a role in controlling the number of vehicles on the road, and they should also take a role in low carbon transport? Because you see, government departments are responding very slowly to the EPD, and you can only do so much fine-tuning within your ambit. Well, we should divide the discussion into two parts. We have large vehicles such as buses and lorries, and then we have private vehicles. Mr. Mok can take us through that. Mr. Wu, I think you're referring to private vehicles, because in commercial vehicles they have always been using diesel for various reasons, and we also have a lot of diesel vehicles for sale. In private vehicles, you have to look at it, as you mentioned, the growing number of vehicles. So that's regardless of whether it's diesel or gasoline. The Transport Department from the transport perspective, when they look at road use and the environmental department, we don't want to see the congestion and pollution going up because of more vehicles. At the beginning of the year, the transport panel had met, I won't go into that discussion, but on private vehicle use of diesel, we have raised our concerns in the document. Mr. Wu is correct. Diesel and gas has a big price differential. So if we have more diesel vehicles on the roads, then people might choose diesel because of fuel prices. So we have some concerns. Diesel private vehicles, even if we have a stringent requirement that they have to be equivalent to gasoline private vehicles before they can register, because in Euro is aware that diesel emissions are of a lower quality, so they have a laxer requirement. But we have a stringent requirement. They need to meet gasoline emission standards to register in Hong Kong for the first time. But we have technology improvements, and some diesel vehicles can meet gasoline emission standards, but their actual emissions are still higher than gasoline vehicles because we have more roadside pollution. Second, we don't have a good method to identify. They are not emitting RSPs, they are emitting NOx. So we need roadside equipment, and if there are higher emissions of carbohydrates, then our roadside pollution will increase. So the document says that we need to review and see that whether we can use less diesel private vehicles. We need to review that, and in the coming few months we'll meet with the industry and stakeholders to see what feasible measures they can come up with. Will the legislation handle this or not be able to cover this? Well, can we use the law to stop first registration of diesel vehicles? Well, we are worried that whether the law can allow us to do so. If that can be done, it would be effective. But do we have any other measures? This is something that we need to explore. Well, to put it bluntly, if we can legally allow private vehicles where we can bar that diesel vehicles, that's something we want to consider. Enhancing standards will get my support. Of course, for commercial vehicles and private vehicles, including taxis and large buses, Chairman's analysis on air pollution and so on, buses will have a large impact, even though we have more private vehicles. But for the consumers, they are first concerned about whether there is sufficient choice. And then a care and maintenance industry, the government will not reduce choices and lead us to higher prices in care and maintenance. Now, even though some delegations are worried about this, I want to ask a question about private vehicles and taxis implementation date, 1st of September 2016. So new standard and new registration, they have to comply with the new standard. So what is the schedule for phasing out older vehicles? For existing vehicles that do not comply with Euro 6? Do we have any methods to help them? We are tightening standards. So for the existing fleet, it'll take a long time to phase out. The public might want an accelerated timetable to enhance air quality. So for existing fleets on the roads that don't comply, do we have simple measures, inexpensive measures to improve the overall air quality? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. Regarding the existing fleet, how will we deal with them? Oh, we have two types of vehicles, broadly speaking. We have diesel, especially diesel commercial vehicles, and other vehicles, gasoline, LPG.
With regard to emission, majority, if we look at particulates, NOx, they are mainly emitted from diesel vehicles. As for LPG and petrol vehicles, if there is good maintenance, the emission, relatively speaking, is of a smaller proportion. We also have remote monitoring machines to check that. As for the maintenance of diesel vehicles, as you all know, starting from March last year, we had a plan. The government has put in $14 billion to phase out Euro 4 diesel vehicles according to a timetable. This will deal with the existing fleet. Chairman, concerning the timetable, the private cars will have to meet the requirement earlier and the buses later. What's the reason? Now you say private cars are able to meet Euro 6 standard, and they start from the 1st of September. They started from 1st of December this year and will comply 1 year later. Is it because of the European Union that our timetable has been affected? Now, as said by Mr. Chair, that's about the choice of vehicles available to the trade. We have to consider the timetable of the European Union. Usually it will be earlier. But we also have to consider local supply, whether there are vehicles that can meet the standard. In the paper, we said that we contacted the vehicle manufacturers as to when will their Euro 6 vehicles be available in the Hong Kong market. We have to consider the supply of vehicles. If the manufacturer of Euro 6 vehicles are accounting for a large proportion of the market share, and then we'll have to take that into account. Many private cars have met Euro 6 standard. In fact, there is no change between Euro 5 and Euro 6 standard, apart from the particle number limit requirement. Other things remain the same for Euro 5 and Euro 6. Therefore, private cars can go first. And so the timetable is mainly based on the supply of vehicles. Ms. Albert Chan. Well, I fully understand the requirement, and there is no reason to oppose the proposal. But there is a question which is less discussed, and that is the quality of petrol or diesel. Recently, there were reports that the petrol of certain companies are substandard. We talked to drivers who make a living by driving, they say that the performance of the petrol supplied by certain oil companies or petrol companies is not good enough. Say if the petrol is substandard, then the emission will be more problematic. So apart from paying attention to the models and makes of vehicles, there is a need to monitor the quality of petrol. However good the vehicles are, if the petrol is not good, it's still a problem, and it's just a waste of money to buy higher standard vehicles. The AD. As for petrol and diesel for vehicles, we do have a quality requirement. And our colleagues, from time to time, do take samples from the oil companies or petrol companies to check whether the petrol they sold are up to standard. And we have not found any problem with them. But we welcome any advice from the trade. And we will follow that information and try to conduct an investigation on that. I want to know how frequent do you take samples? And concerning whether there is any prior notice to be given to the relevant institutions. My colleague can speak on this. Yes, please. Once every 2 months, we take samples from 3 petrol stations. We take diesel and petrol samples, and then we take them to the government laboratory for testing. And we do not give prior notice to the petrol stations. Mr. Chan, I don't know whether 3 is enough. There are more than 3 petrol companies in Hong Kong. So if it is just 3 samples for every 2 months, that is too few. You may recall the short-piling of HOS, and there were a lot of tricks. It's not a problem with the one who did the testing. And there is also switching of samples. So if you just choose 3 petrol stations for testing, I think it's too loose. The AD. You should at least pick 2 petrol stations from each company. There are so many oil companies. And you should at least pick 2 petrol stations from each oil company. You really can't go around the oil companies in one test. And there is no wonder you can't find a problem. The drivers have told me more than a year ago. Now you just take 3 samples from the petrol stations. I think the most important thing is we don't give any prior notice. It is not a prearranged sampling arrangement. We do it by random sampling. That's the importance. Can you choose? You can change it. Per company, at least 2 petrol stations per oil company. There are many petrol stations in Hong Kong. Do you know how much money is involved in terms of profits, in terms of consumption, costs of consumption? How much money do you need for taking samples and for testing? Well, Mr. Chen, I've given you more time with my discretion. And today we are not on the issue of taking samples. If you want to follow the matter up, yes, Chairman, I've already given my view. I hope the Undersecretary will consider that. Otherwise, I will have to do something about it. Yes, next. Mr. Kwok Wai Keung. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the Bureau for making such a proposal to change the law. Now you've just got more than $10 billion to replace Euro 5 vehicles, said the Speaker. And now you're going to raise it to Euro 6. So is it the trend of going for the newest technology as far as emission reduction is concerned? Will that go against the scheme of supporting Euro 5, the use of Euro 5 vehicles? Now, you did consult the suppliers, the vehicle suppliers. I don't know whether members have asked the question before.
即係業界嘅代表，究竟佢哋點睇？
Have you consulted the trade with regard to the new arrangement? What will be the impact on them? My third question is the restriction apply only to the newly imported vehicles? Well, the second-hand car trade is rather good, and I've just bought a second-hand car. So how would it affect second-hand car trading? The AD, with regard to Euro 6 vehicles, the emission standard will be better than Euro 5. Now, within the replacement scheme, we have changed the standard, so if they buy new vehicles, they will have to buy Euro 6 rather than Euro 5 vehicles, and that will be an improvement. As for repair and maintenance, some members have asked the question before. All along, we are concerned about whether the garages are able to know the standard and acquire the skills. In fact, the parts for Euro 5 and Euro 6 vehicles, as far as emission reduction is concerned, are similar. The only difference is the efficiency of the parts and also the application of the technology and wider application of the technology. So it is nothing new to the garages. But anyways, we need to enhance the understanding of the trade towards the emission reduction technology, in particular in respect of repair and maintenance, and therefore we arranged seminars for the repair and maintenance trades. They also have the Hong Kong Commercial Car Vehicles Repair and Maintenance Association. They are made up of members from small and medium-sized garages. We organize seminars for them, and we try to find ways to help them so that they know more about the standards and also the technology. We will continue to release information to them and enhance communication with them. As for the third question concerning newly imported vehicles, now the tightening of standard will affect the newly imported vehicles. As for registered vehicles, they will not be affected. Mr. Pock. Thank you, Chairman, for the answer. With regard to Euro 6 standard, it was there in 2013. Why the replacement scheme didn't start with Euro 6, but only with Euro 5? Well, and there was a big difference, 80% versus 50%. Why you started with Euro 5 but not Euro 6 in the replacement scheme? The AD. We have to consider the supply of vehicles in Europe. They implemented standard in 2013, at the end of 2013. At that time, in Hong Kong, the supply of Euro 6 vehicles was rather small. And even for European-made vehicles that were sold in Hong Kong, there weren't many meeting Euro 6 standard. We have to consider the local supply of Euro 6 vehicles. Any more members want to ask questions for the first round? If not, then I will use it's time for me to ask my questions within 4 minutes. Now, when you raise the standard to Euro 6, you need to provide adequate backup in terms of repair and maintenance technology, and also the supply of parts should not be monopolized by major manufacturers. And many commercial vehicles owners may not have a wide choice in terms of the make and models. You need to make sure that the technology will not be that similar to the situation with regard to Euro 4, Euro 6, when people were crying for help all the time with regard to repair and maintenance technology. You really need to do more in terms of giving more knowledge to the trade. And with regard to paragraph 6, I have a question. The emission standard of Euro 6 is higher. With regard to NOx and VOC, the limits will be reduced, but PM 2.5 will increase. Now, with the use of Euro 6 standard, there will be more PM 2.5 particles. And in comparison with NOx and VOC or even PM 10, PM 2.5 is more toxic. They can go into the blood as well as the lungs.
So after we tighten it, the toxicity, why is it going higher? Why is it going up? So the harm to the public would even go up. Could you respond to these questions? Thank you, Chairman. Before I respond to PM 2.5, I'd like to talk about maintenance work. Aside from seminars, we will work with VTC. We want to refine the curriculum. It would be a long-standing effort. Regarding models, vehicle models, in our timetable we have considered the supply and the models available. And the third question is, why is PM 2.5 going up? We see there's a trend that we're working on reducing carbon. So for gasoline vehicles, we have a direct injection engine technology. So the combustion characteristics are close to diesel engine characteristics. So the PM 2.5 particulate emissions will be higher. It would be similar to diesel. But this is a balance. There is less carbon. But we cannot allow them to emit more PM 2.5. That's because of this in Euro 6. For these types of gasoline vehicles, in the past they wouldn't have monitoring of PM 2.5, but because of this type of design of gasoline vehicles, they need to regulate the number of particles. The PM 2.5 are very light, very small. If it enters the bloodstream, it's very light. There's no point in regulating the weight. So they are regulating the number of particles. They can count the number of particles. That's why they have a particle number limit. Well, PAS, you're saying that after tightening the standards, there is more harm to health. You can't regulate the emission of PM 2.5. Last week, the Secretary couldn't respond that they what equipment they had to detect PM 2.5. But you're tightening the standard. You're negatively affecting health. Allow me to explain. The Secretary last week said he could not measure PM 2.5. He was referring to the power plant when we give them a PM 2.5 emission quota, because in the smokestack and the flue gas. Well, can you tell me, for these new vehicles, how can you measure the PM 2.5 emissions? The tailgate emissions for vehicles are different from the flue emissions from the power plant because they have desulfurization. They don't have vapor, so it's measurable. So not only the quantity, but they can also detect the number of particulates that can be regulated. It's because they can be regulated, that's why the Euro standard has a PN limit. Well, can you provide a paper for these direct injection engines, what their PM emissions are? You're just talking about NOx and PM10. Okay, we can do that. Second round, we have Wu Jiwai, Jie Wai Chun, and Albert Chan. 2 minutes. Wu Jiwai. Another part of my question was about the EPD. The Secretary said that we need to expend more effort in low-carbon transport. So do you have any specific goals? If not, of course I support tightening the standards, but roadside transport, waste, and that has a greater impact on pollution, especially in downtown area. So what are you doing in promoting green transport? Well, this is an appropriate moment to talk about our new bus fleet, new technology. We have some hybrid vehicles. They are Euro 6 and electric vehicles. This is new technology that is being tested. Second, you are aware that we have 36 electric buses, a single-decker, that will be delivered in the coming 12 months. Some of them have already arrived, but they haven't completed testing. They need licensing and so on. Now, assuming the technology is feasible, but the operation, we need to explore how it can be used. For example, the bus companies, they are familiar with the Euro technology. They are aware of the fuel consumption, the maintenance, but for new electric buses, how long is the life cycle of the battery, or what are the maintenance costs? They cannot calculate that. So when we do the testing and the pilot testing, we are testing the technology, and we need to collect data on operations. Then, after doing so, then you can consider your future fleet, what kind of timetable can you roll it out, and what level of resources you need to roll out a fleet of hybrid or electric vehicles. And right now we don't have the complete picture. Well, do you have any goals in your pilot testing? We cannot calculate, we cannot compute these figures yet. We're not talking about dozens of buses. If you want zero emissions from buses, I need to calculate thousands of buses and the timetable to upgrade that fleet. Just now the question was about the BYD. They have some double-decker buses in London doing testing. There are still a lot of technical problems. The 36 electric buses, we funded them, so they need to come back and report to us. Mr. Jie Wai Chun. Just now, my question was about pollution from vehicle emissions, but each type of vehicle has different contribution. So the government is now deploying the Euro standard, but for different types of vehicles. Are the conditions similar to Hong Kong? Their congestion or the road use might be different. So if we don't have that kind of supply, then it will hamper our efforts to roll out the fleet. We don't have enough supply. So if we deploy the Euro standard, will we run into these problems? Well, when they set Euro standards, there are two types of engines they regulate. They have standards. One is compressed combustion, that is a diesel engine. Another type, it needs an ignition, for example, gasoline engine, LPG, or natural gas. So it's under that category. So for these two types of engines, they will set emission standards. So vehicle manufacturers, engine manufacturers, they use these standards to build their engines. We have more private vehicles, so there's research in private vehicles. We're now in downtown with large commercial vehicles. Their impact on the pollution is larger. So we would like to target that first, but there's no choice. So do we rely on Euro, or are there other considerations? If the Hong Kong government had influence and said our commercial vehicles need upgrading, could they step it up? That would be of greater benefit to us. Well, put simply, so whether it is commercial vehicles or private vehicles, it's just as important to them. They have these type of models. We also have these models in Hong Kong. Thank you, Chair. Albert Chan. I want to follow up on your PM 2.5 question. Different density or temperatures would lead to different PM 2.5 consequences because of climate and wind direction. And we have too many tall buildings in Hong Kong. So compared to the European cities, we would have different PM densities. Well, Chairman asked for information later. So could you provide the information on impact of PM 2.5, comparing Hong Kong with other cities under different climate conditions? The changes of PM 2.5 after your new legislation, could you show us the worst case and best case scenario? Is it, as Chairman said, that after your upgrading, there might be more toxicity, especially in Dongchong, because in summer, between noon and 2 p.m., there's PM 2.5 problems where pregnant women, elderly, and children with breathing difficulties. This is a form of long-term murder, especially for residents in Dongchong. Their health and life are affected. So we'd like a complete picture. After changing the legislation, we'd like you to use Dongchong as a reference and demonstrate whether it will be better or worse. Yes, we will supply that later. Leung Kai-Chang. Thank you, Chairman. Just now, the PAS referred to single-deck electric buses, 36 of them. Were they from the same manufacturer? Because aside from large manufacturers, some 7 years ago, Mitsubishi Heavy Industry had asked me regulatory questions. I said there weren't any regulatory problems. They have a different technology. I remember that Mitsubishi, they could charge at the bus stop. So the 36 buses you tested, are they the same model from the same manufacturer? Have you considered different considerations? We have two types of buses. One type that can be charged at the bus stop, It's called the super cap. It's got a super capacitor. They can charge very quickly, but it has a low capacity, so they need to charge at the bus stop. And we have a traditional electric. We are testing both. By the end of this year, we will start testing. Any follow-up, Mr. Leung? No? Well, thank you very much. That will conclude this item. So when you draft this legislative document, please bear in mind legislators and the industry's views. Agenda item number 5. We have Noise Control Ordinance Cap 400 revision of fees. We have Ms. Christine Lowell, Undersecretary, Mr. Tang, Kin Fai, Assistant Director, EPD, and Maurice Young from EPD. This is also a legislative suggestion. I'll allow the government to take us through the paper, and then you can ask questions.
大家都留意下呢。
Please also note that according to the administration's paper, after consulting the panel, it will introduce its legislative proposals and plan to complete it will implement the proposal before the end of this term of 2015 and 16. Yes, please introduce the paper. Yes, thank you, Chairman. As we said in the paper, under the Noise Control Ordinance, there are 4 fees. 2 of them are related to percussive piling, and the other are for mechanical machines, mechanical equipment such as compressors and percussive breakers. They have to obtain NELs. In the past, we did raise fees for these permits and licenses. It was the year 2008. After that, we worked with the trade to cut the cost. In our recent review, we have found that despite the efforts we put in to cutting cost, because of inflation, the cost is so high, and we are not able to meet the government's target of full cost recovery, and therefore we propose to increase the fees. We propose to increase the fees by so as to increase the cost of the rate of cost recovery, and we believe that this 50% increase is appropriate. And we'd like to seek advice from the panel and get support from the panel so that we can do the next step, and that is to consult the ACE and then amend the law and then implement the proposal. Mr. Kwok Wai Kang, Mr. Albert Chan, Mr. Kenneth Leung have signed up for the first round. 5 minutes each. Mr. Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. With regard to the application for permits, construction work other than percussive piling, what exactly is it, or what exactly are they? And there are more than 5,000 applications. What exactly are they? The second question is this. With regard to the first two, is afraid that the increase may be too much, so the proposal is to increase it by 50%, or increase them by 50%. And after that, the cost recovery rate is just 56%. The other one is 68%. So it's still a long way from full cost recovery. Will you give the impression to the community that the government is subsidizing these works? That's the second question. Thank you. The AD. Concerning the first question, the CNP has two classes. One, percussive piling, CNP for percussive piling. And then the rest are the construction works that require machines. Say, for example, power generator, breakers, which are noisy machines. If they do it within the restricted time, i.e., from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. next morning or during holidays, then such machines will have to obtain a permit. Therefore, the CNP for construction work other than percussive piling refers to those processes or machines that are noisy and they have to be operated during the restricted hours. Now we have to consider whether the works are necessary. Some works cannot be conducted in the daytime. Say, for example, road excavations or public utility works. Say gas pipes, water pipes. If they do it in the day, it will affect traffic. It will cause serious inconvenience. Under such circumstances, we will work with the Transport Department and the police, and when necessary, we can issue the CNPs so that such works, such necessary works, can be conducted. These 5,000 odd applications are the CNPs for construction works other than percussive piling. And whether the fee increase by 50% is adequate. Now, after adding 50%, adding the fees by 50%, the cost recovery rate has reached a higher level, though less than full recovery. But they are in the range of 50-something and 60-something. And the trade or the trades are aware that there will be future increases. And we also want to work with the trades to see if there is any room to cut cost. The most important thing is that the work we do are effective. And we also find that the trade can do better. So the message is that the trade has to do better when they apply for the permits, so that our administrative cost will be reduced and the cost pressure will be lower. Chairman, to put it simply, if they are going to increase their fees, then give us a timetable when there will be full cost recovery. With regard to the 5,000 odd applications, some are breakers, some power generators which are noisy. Are they on the road? Are they for roadworks? Do you include repair and or maintenance works in residential buildings? Basically, these permits are related to public works or building construction sites. Some are related to road works. These permits do not cover ordinary residential building renovations. Well, that's very simple. Since the 5,000 odd applications are made by big contractors, you don't really need to care about their purse. My concern is that it covers small works, small-scale works. Ms. Albert Chan. Well, I want to know more about the mechanism and the extent of computerization. Will you accept computerization so as to application by electronic means so that the cost can be reduced? We hope to do so. If the applicant wants to apply by electronic means, they can do so. They can do electronic submissions. The majority of the applicants still rely on paperwork. We will computerize such information so that we can have a better understanding of the situations. There's a better situation. They are all available in the computer. The question is for you whether the submission of application, whether the putting in of information can be computerized instead of making e-submission. Well, I'm not familiar with the application process for the CNP or NELs, but I've come across the government departments which require photocopies, which require the originals. If, in fact, furnishing false information to the government is a crime, you don't really need originals. Recently, I applied for certain visas from Australia. They adopted the computerization. They required submission. Even you apply for BNO passport, you can do it by e-submission. If you allow e-submission, then it will simplify the process and reduce the cost. If you submit papers, then you have to check. To put it simply, they can make e-submissions. How many percent is by e-submission and how many by actual paper submission? Very small number of submissions are by e-submissions. That's the problem. So it is the question of taking the initiative. If you want to cut cost, then you can require e-submission, and then you don't need to increase your fees. You don't have such an option, right? The Undersecretary is for e-submission, or computerization is the trend. Our colleagues are encouraging the trade to make e-submissions. I don't agree. You put the blame on the trade. You talk to the trade. Now, if you do e-submission, it will be cheaper. Then they will move on to e-submission. Say, if you do it by e-submission, I charge you $500. But if you submit papers, then I charge you $1,000. Can you tell us what are the difficulties of handling e-submissions? As for the applicant, when they fill in a form, they find it simple. They want to send in a check. It is simple. I find it scary. You're really outdated. You're out of touch with the times. You say submitting a paper is simpler. Everybody knows e-submission is simpler. You need adjustment in making the change. The world has gone into e-submissions. You say submitting a paper is simpler. Are you living on Mars? Chairman, well, I just say it from the perspective of the applicants. We, of course, encourage them to make e-submissions. But we do allow them to make manual submissions. It's up to them. Chairman, they have not considered the benefits of e-submission. I therefore oppose this proposal. Vide, can you clarify this? Is it the submission by email, or they can fill in certain information in your system? Basically, they can use their computer and then send the information to us. As for the processing, it is done by us and it is all computerized. Please take note of Mr. Albert Chan's view. Mr. Kenneth Leung.
I'd like to clarify this will involve the changing of the subsidiary legislation. So the first question, your cost calculation, do you use man-hour calculations? So if you do you calculate the salary, and do you also include overhead for each fee? Thank you, Chairman. We include both. So from our calculations, the majority, 70–80% of the cost is employee salary. The other overhead is included. So Mr. Kwok Wai Keung mentioned why we need to subsidize the contractors. Well, for the noise, construction noise permit for percussive piling, so this might take months or a year or two. So whether it's 1 year or 3 years, do they just pay once, regardless of length of the works period? Well, depending on the application, a lot of works, necessary works, our permit will state during what time they can conduct the work. Regarding long projects, a site needs to do piling. The longest is 6 months. The reason being that if works last longer than 6 months, there is a timing schedule. It will affect noise. So over a longer period, other construction sites might need a noise control permit, construction noise permit. So we have to see whether they can comply. So put simply, the longest CNP is 6 months. So it could be a few days to 6 months, they pay the same price. And I'd like to summarize members' views. Albert Chan called for electronic application, but we also questioned you about the calculation of costs. Well, fixed overhead shouldn't be included. If you want to recover costs, that's a long-term goal. So you should consider your workflow, where you can save time, including electronic submission, and you should remove fixed overhead, and you can recover costs in one go. So 180-day project, even if you increase the price to from $900 to $1,000, it's only a small sum, a small increase. So you should look at where you can reduce costs, enhance efficiency, and you should also examine your cost calculation. And third, we're spending time here we have 6-7 people looking at the increase from 68 to 75%. We also have costs here, the electricity. We have more than 100 light bulbs. So I would say that you should do an efficient study and tell us you can recover 100%. Well, we very seldomly support 100% increase. Well, I agree with you. Let's do two things. if we are in agreement, we'll do it in one go. The second, cost efficiency. So this paper is just part of it. So let's conduct a comprehensive review. We'll have to look at the different applications related to EPD and see how we can enhance the efficiency. If we agree, then we'll take that step. Any more questions in the first round? If not, Mr. Kwok. Well, just now we talked about cost reduction. If the department goal is to recover costs, then this arrangement is not appropriate. Why? Because the 2 permits and out of the 6,000 odd applications, some 5,000 are the applications. So we don't see how you are recovering costs. The Undersecretary said that he would re-examine the issue and achieve cost recovery in one go, because this is not achieving your intention. If your intention is to avoid our subsidies, avoid subsidizing contractors, the highest application fee is 1,000, and even if you recover costs, it's only 2,000. So it might be a big sum for the public, but for contractors, this is insignificant. So please review. Do you need to respond? I totally agree. I personally also feel we should do that. Mr. Albert Chan. Well, the Undersecretary, you said that you would look at it. You should draft a flow chart and an assessment the whole workflow and the calculation of costs, and you should calculate that cost versus paper submission, paper applications. I'd like to know what's the difference between electronic application and paper application. Well, just now I said this is one of the applications. I'll go back and talk to the permanent secretary. We'll have to see how many of these applications there are. So we'll conduct. There is the same consideration. It might involve the same consideration. So we'll strengthen our procedure, and we'll follow up with this panel. But if you can endorse the paper, we'll take the step, and I'll discuss with the permanent secretary, and we'll follow up, and I'll report back to the chairman. Well, what is the negative vetting for this? Well, they still need to go consult with the environmental panel before. They need to consult ACE. Could you explain the negative vetting? The government, could you tell us? This is subsidiary legislation, and they deal with it through negative vetting. Well, one is after the expiry of the announcement, if there's no objection, it's endorsed. But if there are objections, they can set up a committee. Undersecretary, we could have a committee under. Well, if you cannot satisfy, I will convene a subcommittee, and it will just delay your progress. It's not a lot of money, but you talk about the Innovation Technology Bureau, but the government is still using these out-of-date practices. We have only very small number of electronic applications. You should feel ashamed of yourself. Well, we don't have any more speakers, so the government should take note of legislative support your fee increase, especially in items 1 and 2. We would like you to see 100% cost recovery. Colleagues have also expressed their dissatisfaction with the electronic applications, so please take note of their views. Do we object? If not, we please keep it on. Please, I would like to have it on record that I object. So we would have to consult with the ACE, and then we can come back to do legislative work. That concludes this item. We now move into AOB. We don't have AOB. Thank you for attending.